Homer crouched behind the smoking wreckage of his escape pod, his knuckles white around the handle of his survival machete. The crash had been brutal. The emergency launch from the research vessel, catastrophic. Now he was alone on Verx Prime, a planet the survey teams had flagged as unexplored and potentially hostile. The classification had been accurate. Around him, primitive warriors with blue-tinted skin moved through the alien jungle, their stone-tipped spears gleaming in the strange violet light of the planet's twin suns. He checked his supplies. The machete, a combat knife strapped to his thigh, a small hatchet from the survival kit, and a makeshift bow he'd fashioned from salvaged materials. No energy weapons, no advanced tech that survived the crash intact. Just him, his training, and the tools of humanity's ancient past. The warriors were closing in, their guttural war cries echoing through the dense foliage. Homer calculated his odds and didn't like the result. A roar split the air, so deep and primal it made his bones vibrate. The warriors froze, their aggressive posture shifting to fear. Homer recognized that sound from the briefing files he'd skimmed before the mission went sideways. Razor beasts, the apex predators of Verx Prime, used by some tribes as war mounts, feared by all. They resembled a nightmarish fusion of prehistoric carnivore and armored tank, the size of an earth rhinoceros with temperaments to match pit bulls and jaws that could snap a man in half. Through the undergrowth, Homer spotted movement. A figure burst into the clearing, running at full sprint. Female, humanoid, with skin the color of jade and long dark hair streaming behind her. She wore minimal clothing, practical but exposing enough green skin to make Homer's tactical assessment pause for a fraction of a second. Behind her, 3 razor beasts crashed through the vegetation like living battering rams, their blue-black scales reflecting the sunlight, foam dripping from jaws filled with teeth like serrated knives. Homer made his decision in an instant. He couldn't leave her. Whatever else he wasn't the kind of man who could watch someone die when he had the power to intervene. He stepped out from cover, raising the bow and knocking one of his precious few arrows. The warrior spotted him and shouted, but the razor beasts were closer, more immediate threats. He released. The arrow flew true, catching the lead razor beast in its left eye. The creature shrieked, a sound like metal scraping against metal, and stumbled. Not dead, not even close, but hurt and angry. Homer shouted a wordless bellow of challenge, drawing his machete and beating it against the twisted metal of his pod's hull. The noise was tremendous, attracting exactly the attention he wanted. The green-skinned woman glanced back, her violet eyes wide with shock. 2 razor beasts shifted focus, turning their massive heads toward Homer. The third continued after the woman, but she was fast, incredibly fast, putting distance between herself and the predator with inhuman speed and agility. The first razor beast charged. Homer stood his ground until the last possible second, then dove and rolled, slashing upward with the machete as tons of muscle and fury passed over him. The blade bit deep into the creature's unarmored belly, opening a long gash that spilled dark blood onto the alien soil. The beast roared in pain but didn't stop, its momentum carrying it into the wreckage. The second beast was more cautious, circling, its intelligent red eyes studying the strange prey that fought back. Homer adjusted his grip on the machete, his other hand drawing the combat knife. The creature feinted left, then lunged right. Homer barely dodged, feeling hot breath wash over him as jaws snapped shut inches from his face. He stabbed with the knife, aiming for the soft tissue around the mouth, and was rewarded with another shriek of pain. But the beast was learning, adapting. It swung its massive head, catching Homer's shoulder with a glancing blow that sent him sprawling. The machete flew from his grip. The razor beast advanced, blood dripping from its wounded mouth, victory gleaming in those crimson eyes. Homer's hand found a jagged piece of metal from the pod. Not much of a weapon, but it was all he had. The creature tensed to spring. Homer prepared to sell his life dearly. Then a green blur slammed into the razor beast from the side with the force of a missile strike. The woman had returned. She and the beast tumbled across the clearing in a tangle of limbs and scales. Homer scrambled for his machete, but by the time he had it, the fight was over. The woman sat astride the razor beast's neck, her fists red with its blood. She'd beaten it to death with her bare hands, her face a mask of fierce determination that slowly melted into exhaustion. She climbed off the corpse and looked at Homer, those violet eyes assessing him with a startling intelligence. She spoke, the words liquid and musical, but completely incomprehensible. Homer shook his head, pointing to his ear and shrugging. The woman frowned, then approached cautiously. She pulled something from a small pouch at her hip, a handful of what looked like luminescent moss. She gestured to her mouth, then to his. Homer understood. Translation microbes, a common enough technology even on the frontier. He chewed the moss. It tasted like mint and copper. Within seconds, her next words became clear, though accented and strange. "You are brave, Pinkskin. Foolish, but brave. I am Daphs." "Homer," he replied, wiping blood from his forehead. "And I prefer the term human to Pinkskin, if it's all the same to you." Daphs smiled, revealing perfectly white teeth that were just slightly too sharp. "Human. I have heard of your kind. Warriors from beyond the sky. You are far from your home. Crashed. The pod's totaled, and I need to reach the evacuation point before the rescue window closes. That's 3 days from now, on the other side of this jungle." Daphs nodded slowly. "The jungle is vast and full of death. The variant tribes hunt you, and the razor beasts hunt everything. You will not survive alone." "I noticed. You offering to help?" "Perhaps. If you help me in return, I seek something in the ancient ruins to the north. Technology of my ancestors, or so the legends say. Power to restore my people." Homer glanced at the dead razor beasts, at the tribal warriors who were regrouping in the distance, at the smoking ruin of his only way off this planet. He looked back at Daphs, taking in her athletic build, her confident stance, the way she moved like a predator in her own right. "Deal. Partners?" "Partners." She extended her hand and they clasped forearms in a warrior's grip. They moved quickly through the jungle, putting distance between themselves and the crash site. Daphs proved to be an invaluable guide, reading the terrain like Homer might read a tactical display. She showed him which plants were safe to eat, which water sources would kill him faster than the wildlife, and how to move through the undergrowth without leaving a trail the variant hunters could follow. Homer found himself watching her more than the surroundings. A dangerous lapse in situational awareness he forced himself to correct. But there was something hypnotic about the way she moved, absolutely at home in this hostile environment. She was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that made his heart beat faster for reasons having nothing to do with fear. A rustling to their left. Daphs held up a hand and they froze. A razor beast emerged from the ferns, smaller than the others, perhaps a juvenile. It sniffed the air, searching for prey. Homer slowly drew his bow, nocking an arrow. Daphs shook her head and pointed to herself, then mimed a throwing motion. She picked up a rock, weighed it in her hand, and threw with sudden explosive force. The projectile struck the razor beast's skull with a crack, audible even at this distance. The creature dropped without a sound. Daphs grinned at Homer's impressed expression. "Your weapons are clever, human, but sometimes the old ways are best." They reached the razor beast's corpse. Daphs drew a curved bone knife from her belt and began butchering the creature with practiced efficiency. Homer watched the tree line while she worked, his hatchet ready. Within minutes, she had several strips of meat wrapped in large leaves. "Food! We will need strength for what comes." As they continued, Homer asked about the ruins. Daphs explained that her people, the Kesh, had once been a great civilization spanning many worlds. A cataclysm, the details lost to time, had reduced them to scattered tribes barely above Stone Age technology. The ruins were said to contain knowledge, perhaps even functioning technology, that could elevate the Kesh again. "Why were you exiled?" Homer asked, noting the sadness in her voice when she spoke of her people. "I questioned the elders. They say the old ways brought destruction, that we should never seek to rise again. I believe we should learn from the past, not fear it. For this, I was cast out." "Sounds like your elders are idiots," Homer said bluntly. "No offense," Daphs laughed, a sound like chimes in the wind. "None taken. I believe you are correct." They made camp as the suns began to set, the sky turning from violet to deep crimson. Homer built a small fire while Daphs stood watch. They cooked the razor beast meat, which tasted like a cross between venison and fish. Not unpleasant once Homer got past the blue color. As they ate, Daphs asked about Earth. Homer described oceans and mountains, cities of steel and glass, the diversity of human culture. He told her about his home in the North American wilderness, about fishing in clear mountain streams, and hiking through forests of pine and aspen. "It sounds beautiful," Daphs said softly. "I have only known Verx Prime, jungle and danger and survival, nothing more." "Maybe you'll see Earth someday," Homer offered. "If we get out of this alive, I could show you around." Daphs met his eyes and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended words. She moved closer, close enough that Homer could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The temperature on Verx Prime ran hot, and the Kesh had adapted with higher base body temperatures. "I would like that, Homer of Earth." The moment stretched, charged with possibility. Then a howl echoed through the jungle, and they both snapped back to alertness. Variant hunters, tracking them in the darkness. They extinguished the fire and moved, navigating by the light of Verx Prime's 3 moons. The next day brought new challenges. They encountered a chasm 50 feet wide with a river of something that definitely wasn't water flowing far below, giving off toxic fumes that made Homer's eyes water. Daphs studied the problem, then pointed to a massive vine hanging from a tree on their side of the gap. "We swing, like the long arms." She mimed a primate's movement. "You're kidding." She wasn't. Daphs took the vine, backed up for a running start, and launched herself into space with a war cry that would have made Tarzan proud. She sailed across the chasm and landed in a roll on the far side, coming up with a triumphant gesture. Homer looked at the vine, looked at the toxic river far below, and seriously questioned his life choices. But there was no other way forward. He took the vine, said a quick prayer to whatever gods might be listening, and ran. The swing was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. He crashed into the far bank less gracefully than Daphs, but he made it. "Not bad for a human," she teased, helping him up. "I hate you a little right now," he muttered, but he was grinning. They pressed on, developing a rhythm of movement and communication that required fewer words as time passed. Homer found himself trusting Daphs with his life, and she seemed to feel the same about him. When a razor beast attacked from ambush, they moved as one unit. Homer's hatchet took out one eye while Daphs's bone knife found the gap between armored scales at the throat. The beast fell, and they didn't even pause, continuing their northward trek. By midday, they reached a stream of clear water tumbling over smooth stones. They stopped to refill their water containers and rest. Homer washed the blood and grime from his face and arms while Daphs scouted the perimeter. When she returned, she sat beside him on a sun-warmed rock. They were close, shoulders almost touching. Homer was acutely aware of every inch of distance, or lack thereof, between them. "Tell me more about Earth," Daphs said, "about your family." Homer described his parents, both deceased now, victims of a ship malfunction years ago. His sister, who ran a moisture farm on Mars. His best friend, a pilot who'd convinced Homer to join the Colonial Survey Corps. He talked about barbecues and baseball, concepts he had to explain from first principles that left Daphs both amused and confused. "And you? Do you have family?" Daphs's expression darkened. "I had a sister. The elders killed her for the same questions I asked. I escaped, but she did not." Homer reached out instinctively, taking her hand. "I'm sorry." Daphs looked at their joined hands, then at his face. "You are kind, Homer. Soft in ways my people are not, but strong where it matters." She leaned in, her lips brushing his in a tentative kiss. Homer responded, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, weeks of loneliness and the adrenaline of survival combining into something electric. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should keep moving," Daphs said, but she didn't sound convinced. "Probably," Homer agreed, equally unconvincing. They stared at each other for another heartbeat. Then Daphs laughed and stood, pulling Homer to his feet. "Come, the ruins are still far." The terrain grew rougher as they traveled north. The jungle gave way to rocky hills covered in thorny scrub. The temperature dropped as they gained elevation, though it was still warm by Earth standards. They spotted variant patrols twice and had to detour, losing hours. On the third evening, as they set up camp in a cave system Daphs knew from her wanderings, the sky opened up. Rain fell in sheets, lightning splitting the darkness with electric fury. The temperature plummeted, and even Homer felt the chill through his survival gear. Daphs was less prepared. Her minimal clothing offered little protection, and soon she was shivering despite the fire Homer built. She peeled off the wet fabric without hesitation or modesty, hanging it near the fire to dry. Homer tried to be respectful, keeping his eyes on the cave entrance where he stood watch. But it was impossible not to notice the smooth jade skin, the athletic curves, the way firelight played across her body. He cleared his throat and focused very hard on the storm outside. "You are being foolish, Homer," Daphs called from near the fire. "Come here. We both need warmth." He turned and she patted the ground beside her. Homer hesitated only a moment before joining her, adding his body heat to hers. She curled against him, and he wrapped his arms around her, trying to ignore how perfectly she fit against his chest. "Better," she murmured. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the storm. Eventually, Daphs spoke again. "Tell me truly, Homer, do you think we can survive this? Honestly? The odds aren't great. We've got hostile natives, apex predators, unknown terrain, and I've got a rescue window that's ticking down. But I've been in worse spots, and I've never had a partner as capable as you. Flatterer, truth teller, you saved my life at least twice today. And you saved mine when you drew those razor beasts away at the crash site. I think we are even. Then let's keep each other alive a bit longer, yeah?" Daphs tilted her head to look up at him, her violet eyes reflecting the firelight. "Homer of Earth, I am glad you crashed on my world." "Best accident of my life," he agreed, and kissed her. This time there was no hesitation, no pulling back. The storm raged outside, but inside the cave, a different kind of storm took hold. Homer had been alone for so long, and Daphs had been in exile, unwanted by her own people. In each other's arms, they found something neither had expected: connection, passion, and the beginning of something that transcended species or circumstance. Later, as Daphs slept curled against his chest, Homer stared at the cave ceiling and wondered what would happen when they reached the ruins. Would they find what she sought? Would he make it to the evacuation point? And what about after? Could a human and a Kesh have any kind of future together? Too many questions, not enough answers. He pushed the thoughts aside and focused on the present. The warmth of Daphs beside him, the sound of her breathing, the simple miracle of being alive. Morning brought crystalline clarity. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and sparkling in the sunlight. They broke camp efficiently, their movements synchronized in a way that came from growing trust and the intimacy of the night before. As they descended from the hills back into jungle terrain, Daphs suddenly froze. Homer recognized the posture of someone sensing danger and immediately went on alert. Then he heard it, a low rhythmic thumping that shook the ground beneath their feet. Through the trees ahead, something massive moved. Daphs grabbed Homer's arm, her grip tight enough to hurt. "Alpha," she whispered, her voice shaking with fear for the first time since he'd met her. The creature that emerged into the clearing was beyond anything Homer had seen before. If the other razor beasts were rhinoceros-sized, this thing was the size of a small building. Scales the color of midnight covered a body rippling with muscle, each movement speaking of power that could shatter stone. Its head swiveled toward them, and Homer saw intelligence in those red eyes, a malevolence that marked this creature as more than just an animal. The alpha razor beast roared, and the sound was like a physical blow. Birds fled from the trees. Smaller creatures scattered. Even Daphs, brave and fierce Daphs, trembled. "Run," Homer said quietly. "It's faster. It will hunt us down. Then we fight. We cannot win." Homer looked at the creature, at its armored hide and massive jaws. He looked at his primitive weapons, machete, knife, hatchet, and a handful of arrows. He thought about his training, about human history, about all the times his species had faced impossible odds and won through sheer bloody-minded refusal to quit. Maybe, maybe not. But I'm not dying on my knees, and I'm not letting it kill you. So we fight, Daphs. We fight until we win, or we don't. The alpha charged. Its speed was terrifying, closing the distance in seconds. Homer shoved Daphs aside and dove in the opposite direction, barely avoiding jaws that could have swallowed him whole. He rolled to his feet and threw his hatchet with all his strength, catching the beast in the shoulder. The blade bounced off armored scales, doing no visible damage. The Alpha turned to face him, and Homer saw his death approaching. Then Daphs was there, leaping onto the creature's back, her bone knife stabbing repeatedly at the base of its skull. The Alpha thrashed, trying to dislodge her. Homer used the distraction to sprint forward, sliding beneath the massive body and slashing upward with his machete at the less armored belly. Blue-black blood rained down, but it wasn't enough. The wound was superficial, and now the Alpha was even angrier. It finally succeeded in throwing Daphs off, sending her tumbling across the clearing. Homer heard the crack of impact and saw her lie still. Rage unlike anything he'd ever known flooded through him. This monster had hurt the woman he loved. Yes, loved. He realized it in that moment of clarity that sometimes comes in combat. He loved Daphs, her strength and her vulnerability, her courage and her laugh, and he'd be damned if he'd let this oversized lizard take her from him. Homer charged at the Alpha with a roar that was pure primal fury. He threw his knife at the creature's face, and by sheer luck, it sank into the Alpha's left eye. The beast shrieked and shook its head, blinded on one side. Homer saw his opportunity. He ran, not away but toward, and leaped. He landed on the Alpha's neck, machete in his hand. The creature bucked and twisted, trying to throw him off as it had Daphs. But Homer wrapped his legs around the massive neck and held on. He brought the machete down again and again, aiming for the same spot Daphs had targeted, the vulnerable point where skull met spine. The scales there were thinner, designed for flexibility. Blood flowed freely as Homer struck with desperate strength. The Alpha stumbled, its movements growing uncoordinated. Homer kept striking, his arms burning, his grip slipping in the blood that covered everything. Finally, with a blow that took the last of his strength, the machete bit through something vital. The Alpha razor beast collapsed, its massive body hitting the ground like a falling tree. The impact threw Homer clear. He landed badly, feeling something crack in his ribs, but he was alive. He crawled to Daphs. She was breathing but unconscious, a nasty gash on her forehead bleeding freely. Homer tore strips from his shirt to bandage the wound, his hands shaking with reaction and fear. She'd taken a hard hit. Concussion for sure, possibly worse. Come on, Daphs, don't you dare leave me now. We've got ruins to find, remember? And I promise to show you Earth. You can't see Earth if you're dead. Her eyes flickered open, unfocused. Homer, did we win? We won. Rest now. Can't. The poison. The Alpha's claws. Homer looked at her in confusion, then noticed the deep scratches on her side, already inflamed and oozing. His blood went cold. Poison. Of course these things had poison claws, because this planet wasn't hard enough already. What do we do? Daphs' voice was already getting weaker. Oasis, north. Silver flowers point the way. Water heals all wounds. But far, very far. How far? Half a day, maybe more. Homer, I don't think. Stop, you're going to make it. I'm carrying you there, and you're going to drink that water, and you're going to be fine, understand? She smiled weakly. Stubborn human. Homer gently lifted her, cradling her against his chest despite the screaming protest from his cracked ribs. He walked north, following the direction she'd indicated. Within an hour, he spotted the first silver flower, its petals gleaming like metal in the sunlight. He kept walking. Daphs drifted in and out of consciousness. When she was lucid, she gave him directions. When she wasn't, she mumbled in her native language, words he couldn't understand but which tore at his heart nonetheless. Her skin grew hot with fever, and the wounds on her side darkened, spreading outward in ominous black veins. Homer walked. His ribs burned, his legs screamed, his shoulders ached from her weight, though she was lighter than a human woman her size would be. He walked because stopping meant death. He walked because giving up wasn't in his nature. He walked because he loved her, and love meant doing the impossible when the possible wasn't enough. The silver flowers became more numerous, creating a trail through the jungle. Homer followed them like a man in a dream, putting one foot in front of the other through sheer force of will. The suns climbed to their zenith and began their descent. Shadows grew long. Daphs' breathing became labored, rattling in her chest. Stay with me, Homer pleaded. Just a little longer. Please. He emerged from the tree line into a clearing, unlike anything he'd seen on Verk's Prime. The jungle gave way to soft grass that felt like velvet under his boots. Silver flowers grew in profusion, their light filling the air with a gentle glow. And in the center of it all, a pool of water so clear and pure, it seemed to shimmer with its own luminescence. The oasis. He'd found it. Homer stumbled to the water's edge and gently laid Daphne down. Her eyes were closed, her breathing barely perceptible. The black veins had spread across her torso, reaching toward her heart. He cupped water in his hands and brought it to her lips. Drink, Daphne, please drink. A few drops passed her lips, then a few more. Homer bathed her wounds with the water, and as it touched the poisoned flesh, he saw the infection begin to recede. The black veins lightened, then faded. The wounds closed, leaving only faint silver scars. Daphne's eyes opened, clear and focused. She looked at Homer, then at the oasis around them. You did it. You carried me all this way. Of course I did. I told you, I'm stubborn. She reached up and touched his face, her hand trembling. You are more than stubborn, Homer of Earth. You are magnificent. Homer laughed, the sound breaking into a sob. Relief flooded through him, so intense it made his knees weak. She was alive. She was going to be okay. He collapsed beside her, and she wrapped her arms around him, holding him as he'd held her. They stayed at the oasis for several hours, recovering their strength. Homer's ribs still hurt, but the pain was manageable. Daphne's was remarkably recovered, the oasis water working its miraculous healing. They bathed in the pool, washing away blood and dirt, and drank deeply of the pure water. As they rested on the soft grass, Daphne told Homer more about the ruins. According to the legends, they contained not just technology but a starship, one of the last functioning vessels from the height of Kesh civilization. If they could activate it, Homer wouldn't need to reach the evacuation point. They could fly off Verk's Prime in style. There's a catch, isn't there? Homer asked. There's always a catch. The ruins are sacred to the variant tribes. They guard them jealously. We will have to fight our way in. At this point, what's a few more fights? They set out at dusk, heading north by northeast. The terrain grew rockier, the jungle thinning out. By midnight, they saw the ruins rising against the stars. They were massive, structures of stone and something else, something that caught the moonlight and reflected it in complex patterns, beautiful and eerie in equal measure. But between them and the ruins stood a problem, a variant war camp, dozens of warriors armed with spears, axes, and bows. Cooking fires dotted the perimeter, and guards walked patrol routes with military precision. Ideas, Homer whispered. Create a distraction. While they investigate, we slip past. What kind of distraction? Daphne grinned, and in the moonlight, she looked absolutely feral. Follow me. They circled wide around the camp, approaching from the north. Daphne showed Homer a cluster of boulders balanced precariously on a slope above the camp. Understanding dawned. They positioned themselves behind the largest boulder and pushed. It resisted at first, then shifted. More pressure, muscles straining, and suddenly it tipped. The boulder rolled down the slope, gathering speed and collecting smaller rocks along the way. It crashed into the camp like a meteor, scattering fires and flattening tents. Warriors shouted in alarm, rushing to investigate. In the chaos, Homer and Daphne sprinted past the perimeter and into the ruins. The structures loomed around them, walls covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift in the corner of Homer's eye. Daphne led him deeper, navigating by some instinct or memory. They descended stairs worn smooth by countless feet, going down into the heart of the complex. The chamber they entered took Homer's breath away. It was vast, easily the size of a football stadium, and filled with strange equipment that hummed with dormant power. But the centerpiece dominated everything else. A ship, sleek and organic-looking, its hull seemed to be made of some material that was part metal, part something alive. It was beautiful. Daphne approached a panel near the ship's boarding ramp. She placed her hand on it, and the panel lit up, scanning her. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the panel flashed green, and the ramp lowered with a hiss of escaping air. My bloodline. The ship recognizes me as one of its creator's descendants. They boarded, moving through corridors that adjusted their lighting as they passed. The control room was a marvel of design, controls that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. Daphne sat in the pilot's chair, and information flooded her mind. Data from the ship itself teaching her how to fly it. "It's alive," she breathed. "The ship is alive, bonded to my family line. It's been waiting for someone to claim it. Can you fly it?" "I think so. The ship will help. But Homer, there's something else, the ship's name. It's calling itself Redemption. I think it wants to fulfill its original purpose, to save my people." Rumbling from above interrupted them. The variants had discovered their intrusion and were trying to force their way into the ruins. Homer checked his weapons, ready for a last stand if necessary. "How long do you need?" "Give me 5 minutes. The ship needs to warm up its systems." Homer moved to the entrance, taking a defensive position. The variants appeared, dozens of them, their blue-tinted faces twisted with rage. Homer stood alone, machete in one hand, knife in the other, blocking the only path to the control room in Daphne's. The first warrior charged. Homer sidestepped and struck, his machete opening a long cut across the warrior's back. The second came in low with a spear. Homer deflected with his knife and kicked out, sending the warrior stumbling into his companions. They came in a rush then, overwhelming numbers trying to swamp him. Homer fought with desperate skill, every lesson from his combat training coming into play. He cut and parried, dodged and struck, turning the corridor into a bottleneck that worked in his favor. Bodies fell, but more kept coming. A spear grazed his thigh. An axe caught his shoulder, opening a wound that bled freely. Homer felt his strength waning, his movements slowing. He couldn't hold much longer. "Homer!" Daphne's voice echoed from behind him. "We're ready, come on!" He turned and ran, the variant surging after him. He burst into the control room, and Daphne hit a control. A barrier of shimmering energy snapped into place, cutting off their pursuers. Homer collapsed into a seat, breathing hard. "Hold on," Daphne said, and the ship rose. The sensation was like nothing Homer had experienced. The ship moved with organic grace, rising through the ruins. Structure crumbled around them as Redemption broke free from millennia of burial. The variants scattered as the vessel emerged into the night sky. Daphne guided the ship higher, breaking through the atmosphere with barely a tremor. The jungle and the dangers fell away below them. Soon the curve of Verx Prime became visible, then the black of space studded with stars. Homer moved to stand beside Daphne's chair, looking out at the cosmos. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd survived. He took her hand, squeezing gently. "Where to?" she asked. "The Galactic Fleet has an outpost 3 systems over. We can get medical treatment, file reports. After that," he looked at her, this amazing woman who'd become everything to him in just a few days. "After that, I promise to show you Earth." Daphne smiled, and it lit up her entire face. "I would like that very much, Homer of Earth." She entered coordinates, and the ship's faster-than-light drive engaged. The stars stretched into lines of light, and they left Verx Prime behind. Homer watched the woman he loved pilot a living starship with growing confidence, and he realized that his life had changed forever in the best possible way. The outpost appeared on sensors an hour later. Daphne brought Redemption into dock with surprising skill. Fleet personnel met them at the airlock, their expressions shocked to see a human and an unknown alien species emerging from a ship that registered on no database. Commander Barry, the outpost ranking officer, was a grizzled veteran who'd seen his share of strange occurrences. He listened to Homer's report with raised eyebrows, occasionally glancing at Daphne with undisguised curiosity. "Hell of a story, Homer. And the ship belongs to her people. Ancient tech, sentient AI, the works. She's the legitimate heir, so to speak." Barry nodded slowly. "We'll need to run some scans, verify everything. But if what you're saying checks out, this could be a major discovery. First contact with a new species, recovered technology. You've had quite the adventure." "You could say that, sir." They were given quarters to rest and recover. Medical examined them both, marveling at Daphne's unique physiology and the advanced healing from the oasis water. Homer's ribs were treated, along with his various cuts and bruises. Clean, fed, and patched up. They met again in the station's observation lounge. Daphne stood at the viewport looking at the stars. Homer joined her and she leaned against him, comfortable and natural. What happens now? She asked. Well, I have to debrief with my superiors. You'll probably be invited to speak with the diplomatic corps. They'll want to establish relations with any surviving Kesh, and redemption will be studied, though hopefully with your permission. And after all that, Homer smiled. After all that, I'm taking a long leave. And if you're willing, I'd like to take you to Earth, show you the oceans and the mountains, introduce you to real barbecue, maybe teach you to fish. I would like that, all of it. She turned to face him, her violet eyes serious. Homer, I know we come from different worlds. Our people have never met before. There will be those who question what we have. But I want you to know, what I feel for you is real. I know, I feel the same. And I don't care what anyone else thinks. We survived hell together, Daphs. We earned the right to whatever comes next. She kissed him, and it was the kiss of new beginnings, of possibilities explored, and futures uncertain, but full of promise. In the following days, Homer filed his official report. Daphs met with diplomats and scientists, answering questions about her people and the ship. Redemption scans revealed technology centuries ahead of current fleet capabilities, though much was still a mystery. The ship remained bonded to Daphs, responding only to her commands. Eventually, clearances came through. Homer was granted extended leave, and Daphs was issued a provisional citizenship in the Galactic Coalition, the first of her species to receive such a status. Together, with Redemption as their transport, they set course for Earth. The trip took a week, and they spent it exploring the ship and each other. Redemption revealed new capabilities daily, from advanced sensors to what appeared to be healing bays. Daphs proved to be a quick learner, absorbing information about galactic culture and human society with eager curiosity. Earth appeared on their view screen, blue and green and beautiful. Daphs stared at it with wonder, this world that had given birth to the man who'd saved her life and stolen her heart. They landed at the main spaceport in North America. Homer arranged for Redemption to be housed in a secure facility, and they emerged to face a new adventure, introducing an alien woman to Earth culture. The first week was overwhelming. Daphs experienced everything from crowded cities to quiet forests, from restaurants serving cuisine from a dozen nations, to simple campfires under open skies. She tried pizza and declared it acceptable but strange. She saw the ocean and spent an entire day playing in the surf. She met Homer's sister, who welcomed her with warm hospitality despite her initial shock. They hiked in the mountains Homer had described, following trails through pine forests to clear alpine lakes. Daphs's enhanced strength and endurance made her a natural at the physical challenges, though she struggled with the cold at higher elevations. Your world is beautiful, she said one evening as they watched the sun set from a mountain peak. Different from Verx Prime, but beautiful. I'm glad you like it, though I have to say, even Earth seems more interesting with you here. Flatterer? Truth-teller, he corrected, echoing their earlier conversation. They descended to a small mountain town, renting a cabin near a lake. For a week they simply existed together, fishing and hiking and learning the small intimacies of daily life. Homer taught Daphs to cast a fishing line, and she proved surprisingly adept, catching a trout her first try. They cooked it over an open fire, and Daphs declared Earthfish superior to Razor Beast any day. Evenings were spent in the cabin, talking about dreams and possibilities. Daphs wanted to return to Verx Prime eventually, to try to unite the scattered Kesh tribes and bring them into the larger galactic community. Homer supported this goal and offered to help however he could. I could request a diplomatic posting, he suggested. Work as a liaison between Earth and the Kesh. We'd be building something together, helping your people while representing mine. You would give up your life here? I'd be adding to it, not giving it up. My life is wherever you are now, Daphs. Everything else is just details. She kissed him, and in that moment, all the uncertainty of the future didn't matter. They had each other, and they had time to figure everything else out. One night, as they lay together under a sky full of stars, Daphs asked the question that had been hovering between them. Homer, are we allowed? Your people and mine, I mean. Is there a law against what? Against falling in love? Against two people from different worlds choosing to be together? Not as far as I know. It's unusual, sure. But the galaxy's a big place. We're probably not the first, and we won't be the last. Good, she said simply, snuggling closer. Because I do not intend to let you go. Homer of Earth. You are mine now. And you're mine? Possessive alien girlfriend. I can work with that. She swatted his chest playfully, and he caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, at peace for the first time since they'd met. The next morning brought news. Commander Barry contacted them with an update. A science team had been dispatched to Verx Prime to investigate the ruins more thoroughly. They'd made contact with several Kesh tribes and extended an offer of technological assistance and education. Some tribes were receptive, others hostile, but it was a start. There's more, Barry said. We found evidence that other Kesh enclaves exist on neighboring worlds. Your people aren't as scattered as you thought, Daphs. With redemption in your bloodline, you could reunite them. Daphs looked at Homer, her expression torn between hope and uncertainty. He squeezed her hand. It's your call. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. She took a breath and turned back to the view screen. Tell the science team I'll join them. We'll approach the tribes together, show them that cooperation brings benefits. And Commander, request diplomatic status for Homer. He's my partner in this. Already done. Welcome to the Diplomatic Corps, Homer. Congratulations on the strangest first contact in fleet history. They spent another few days on Earth preparing for the mission. Homer's sister threw them a going-away party, inviting friends and neighbors who were curious about the green-skinned woman their town's favorite son had brought home. Daphs handled the attention with grace, answering questions about her world and her people with patience. One of Homer's old friends, a pilot named Aaron, pulled him aside at the party. You know you're living a fantasy, right? Crash on an alien world, rescue the beautiful alien princess, fly off into the stars together. That's the stuff of movies. Homer glanced at Daphs, who was laughing at something his sister had said. Yeah, I know, lucky me. Seriously though, are you happy? Happier than I've ever been. She's incredible, Aaron. Strong and smart and brave. She saved my life at least as many times as I saved hers. And she makes me want to be better, to do more. How could I not be happy? Aaron clapped him on the shoulder. Then I'm happy for you. Just promise me one thing. When you're off being a galactic diplomat and reuniting lost civilizations, don't forget about us little people back on Earth. Never. This is home. It'll always be home. But home can be more than one place now. They left Earth aboard Redemption 3 days later. Daphs had insisted on one last hike to Homer's favorite spot, a waterfall hidden deep in the wilderness. They'd spent hours there, memorizing the sound of falling water and the scent of pine, storing up the memory against the unknowns of the future. The trip back to Verx Prime was different from the frantic escape. This time they traveled with purpose and hope. The science team, led by a xenobiologist named Cora, was professional and enthusiastic. They treated Daphs with respect and Homer with friendly curiosity about his survival story. Verx Prime appeared on sensors, the green jewel that had nearly killed them both. But now it looked different to Homer. Not just a death world, but Daphs' home, the place where everything had changed. They landed near the ruins, which were now surrounded by fleet equipment and personnel. The variant tribes watched from the jungle, curious but not hostile. Daphs used Redemption's communication systems to broadcast a message in the Kesh language, an offer of peace and partnership. The response was cautious but promising. Representatives from 3 tribes agreed to meet. Daphs stood before them, Homer at her side, and spoke of a future where the Kesh could reclaim their heritage without repeating the mistakes of the past. The negotiations took weeks. Homer proved invaluable, his straightforward honesty and genuine respect for Kesh culture, winning over even skeptical elders. Slowly, carefully, they built bridges between the fleet and the tribes. And through it all, Redemption sat silent guardian over the proceedings, the living symbol of what the Kesh had been and could be again. One night as they sat together in Redemption's observation lounge, Daphs leaned her head on Homer's shoulder. We did it, she said softly. We're changing the world. Worlds, plural, and we're just getting started. I love you, Homer. Thank you for crashing into my life. Best crash I ever had. I love you too, Daphs. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars and thinking about the future. A future full of challenges and triumphs, of 2 peoples learning to work together, of love that crossed the boundaries of species and culture. Homer thought back to that moment when he'd stepped out from cover to draw the razor beasts away from a green-skinned stranger. It had seemed like a simple choice then, help or don't help. He'd never imagined it would lead to this, to love and partnership, to diplomatic missions and species reunification, to a life richer and stranger than anything he'd dreamed. Daphs shifted, getting more comfortable. What are you thinking about? Just that I'm a very lucky man, and that I can't wait to see what happens next. Whatever it is, we face it together. Together, Homer agreed. And in that moment, aboard a living ship in orbit around a world that had tried to kill them both, they were content. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, but they had each other. Everything else was just details. The peace didn't last. 3 days after the initial negotiations began, one of the science team members went missing. Esme, a young botanist who'd been cataloging the medicinal properties of jungle flora, vanished during what should have been a routine collection expedition. Her escort, 2 fleet security officers, were found dead, their bodies marked with wounds that suggested razor beast attack. Homer stood over the bodies, reading the scene with eyes trained by survival and combat. Something was wrong. The wounds were staged, too clean, too deliberate. Real razor beast attacks left victims torn apart, not neatly slashed. He pointed this out to Daphs, who examined the tracks around the site. Not beasts, she confirmed. Warriors. They wanted us to think beasts, but the footprints tell truth. Variant tribe, but not the ones we negotiate with. Different markings in the soil. Commander Barry, who'd arrived on the surface to oversee the operation, listened to their assessment with a grim expression. You're saying this was an abduction? Yes, Homer said. And whoever took her doesn't want peace. They want to sabotage the negotiations. Then we go get her back. It's not that simple. If we send in fleet troops, we prove we're invaders. The tribes we've been working with will turn against us. But if we do nothing, Esme dies. Daphs stepped forward. I will go. This is my world, my people. I can track the warriors and retrieve the woman without starting a war. Not alone you won't, Homer said immediately. I'm going with you. Barry shook his head. I need you both here for the negotiations. We have representatives from 5 tribes arriving tomorrow. Without you, Daphs, they won't talk. And without Homer's mediation skills, we'll lose everything we've built. Then send me, said a voice from behind them. Clint, one of the fleet Marines assigned to security detail, stepped forward. He was a scarred veteran with cold eyes and a reputation for getting results. I'll take a small team, track them down and bring her back. No offense, Marine, but you'll get lost in the jungle within an hour, Homer said. This isn't a standard combat zone. The terrain will kill you before the natives do. Then give me someone who knows the terrain. Daphs considered for a moment. There is someone. Alan. He is Kesh, from the coastal tribes. He was cast out for taking a human mate during early contact years ago. He lives as a hermit in the deep jungle, but knows it better than anyone. If he will help, he can guide your team. Where do we find him? I will take you, Daphs said, but the negotiations? I'll handle the negotiations, Cora said, stepping forward. The xenobiologist had proven herself capable and was respected by the Kesh representatives. I've been learning the language and customs. With Homer's help, we can keep things moving until you return. Barry nodded slowly. All right. Daphs, take Clint to this Alan. Homer, you stay here and work with Cora. But Daphs, I want you back before the main assembly tomorrow night. Understood? Understood. Homer pulled Daphs aside before she left. Be careful. Something about this feels wrong. I know, but we cannot leave one of our own to die. She kissed him quickly. I will return before you have time to miss me. Too late for that. She smiled and headed out with Clint and 2 other Marines. Homer watched them disappear into the jungle, an uneasy feeling settling in his gut. The negotiations that day were tense. Representatives from the variant tribes were suspicious of the fleet's intentions, and Esme's disappearance had them questioning whether humans could be trusted to keep their people safe. Homer worked alongside Cora, using every diplomatic skill he possessed to keep the talks from falling apart. One elder, a weathered warrior named Thek, with scars crossing his blue-tinted face, was particularly hostile. Your kind brings death, he said through the translator microbes. First the ship falls from sky, bringing weapons and fire. Now one of yours vanishes and you blame us. Perhaps we should kill you all and take your machines for ourselves. Homer met his gaze steadily. If you wanted our machines, you could have attacked the camp at any time. You have the numbers, the knowledge of terrain, and the element of surprise. But you haven't because you're smarter than that. You know technology without understanding is worthless. You know cooperation benefits both our peoples. And you know that I speak truth when I say, we don't blame you for what happened to our colleague. Thek's eyes narrowed. Then who do you blame? The same ones who profit from keeping your tribes divided. The same ones who fear what united Kesh could accomplish. Raiders from the southern waste, perhaps. Or a tribe that sees peace as weakness. Thek leaned back, considering. You speak with wisdom for a pink skin. Very well. We will continue to listen. But if your people prove treacherous, we will paint the jungle with your blood. Fair enough. The talks continued late into the evening. Homer's respect for Cora grew as he watched her navigate complex cultural nuances with genuine interest and sensitivity. She asked questions about Kesh history, their connection to the land, their dreams for the future. The elders responded, slowly warming to her earnest curiosity. But Homer's mind kept drifting to Daph's, somewhere in the jungle tracking an abduction team. He trusted her skills, but the danger was real and immediate. Meanwhile, Daphs led Clint and his team deeper into the wilderness than the fleet had yet penetrated. The jungle here was older, wilder, the trees massive and twisted with age. Strange sounds echoed through the canopy, calls of creatures the science team hadn't yet cataloged. How much further? Clint asked, his hand never far from his machete. Near. Alan's sanctuary is hidden, but I know the markers. She pointed to a tree with peculiar spiral carvings. He lived with a human woman named Bertha, a xenoarchaeologist who came to Verk's Prime 20 years ago. They had a child together before she died of fever. He has been alone since, except for the boy. They found Alan's home in a clearing protected by a ring of thorny plants that had been carefully cultivated as a natural barrier. The dwelling itself was a blend of Kesh and human construction, stone and salvaged metal, forming a structure that looked both primitive and ingeniously designed. Alan emerged as they approached. He was tall for a Kesh, his green skin marked with ritual scars and his hair shot through with gray. His eyes were hard and suspicious until they fell on Daph's. Recognition and something like pain crossed his face. Daphs of the Northern Valleys. I heard you had returned with a human, leading the Sky People's negotiations. I did not expect to see you here. Alan, I need your help. A human woman has been taken by warriors from the southern wastes. We must track them and bring her back before they kill her. Why should I help the Sky People? They brought me nothing but grief. Because this woman is innocent. Because she came to help our people, not harm them. And because I am asking you, as one exile to another. Alan studied her for a long moment, then his gaze shifted to Clint and the Marines. These warriors, they will follow my commands in the jungle? They will not question, will not hesitate? They will, Clint said. I've been in enough hostile territory to know when to listen to the local expert. And if I lead you to the raiders, what then? You will kill them all? We'll do what's necessary to rescue our people. Nothing more, nothing less. Alan nodded slowly. Very well. But know this. The southern wastes are controlled by Crag's tribe. They are cannibals and slavers, the worst of what the Kesh have become. If they have your woman, she is being saved for their feast fires or worse. We must move quickly. A young Kesh male emerged from the dwelling, perhaps 16 in Earth years. He had his father's height but his mother's lighter skin tone, a visible blend of two species. Father, I will come too. No, Can. This is too dangerous. I am strong. I can fight. And you always taught me that hiding from danger is the same as inviting it to your door. Alan looked torn, but Daphs intervened. Let him come. We may need every blade before this is done, and Kane has the right to prove himself. Against his better judgment, Alan agreed. They gathered weapons from his stockpile, bows with arrows tipped in razor beast venom, spears with fire-hardened points, knives of napped stone that could slice through flesh like butter. The Marines added their own weapons to the mix, machetes and hatchets that complemented the primitive arsenal. They moved out within the hour, following a trail only Alan could see. He read bent twigs and disturbed moss, tracks invisible to untrained eyes. The pace was brutal, pushing through dense undergrowth and across swift streams. But Alan was relentless, and his son matched him step for step. By nightfall, they'd covered an astonishing distance. They made camp in a shallow cave, posting guards in shifts. Clint approached Daphs during her watch. "Your friend back at the ruins, Homer. You two are together?" "Yes, he saved my life, and I saved his. We became partners. Then more. Must be complicated, different species and all. Love is never simple, human or cash. But it is worth the complication." Clint nodded. "I had a wife once. Lost her to a pirate raid on a colony world. Sometimes I wonder if I should have retired then. Found a quiet life somewhere. But I kept fighting because it's all I know. Perhaps one day you will find a reason to stop fighting. A person or a place worth more than the next battle. Maybe. Though I'm starting to think I'm too old and too broken for that kind of second chance." My Homer would disagree. He would say it is never too late to choose a different path. They lapsed into comfortable silence, two warriors keeping vigil against the dangers of the night. The next day brought them to the edge of the southern wastes, a region where the jungle gave way to arid scrubland and jagged rock formations. Alan halted the group behind a ridge and pointed to a camp in the valley below. "Cragg's main settlement. See the cages? Your woman is there, in the largest one." Homer looked through the makeshift binoculars he'd fashioned from salvaged optics. Esme was indeed in a bamboo cage, looking terrified but alive. Around her, the raider camp bustled with activity. Dozens of warriors, maybe more, all heavily armed and clearly experienced fighters. "We're outnumbered at least 10-1, Clint said. "A frontal assault would be suicide." "Then we do not assault frontally," Alan said. "We use the wast's most dangerous feature, the sink pools. There are paths through them, but only I know the safe routes. We lure Cragg's warriors into pursuit, lead them into the pools, and thin their numbers before fighting." "That's ruthless. That is survival. These warriors would do worse to you without hesitation." Kane spoke up. "I can create a distraction. Draw them out while you free the woman." "Absolutely not," Alan said immediately. "Father, I am not a child. Let me prove I am Kesh, worthy of both halves of my blood." Daphs put a hand on Alan's shoulder. "He is right, and we need every advantage. But Kane, you do not fight. You create noise, make them think we are a larger force attacking from the east. Then you run. Lead them to the pools where your father will be waiting." "And you?" Kane asked. "I will be freeing Esme while Clint and his Marines provide covering fire from the ridge. When you have drawn off enough warriors, we signal and retreat together." The plan was dangerous and relied on perfect timing, but it was their best option. They prepared through the afternoon, Alan showing Kane exactly which paths were safe through the treacherous terrain. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and purple, they moved into position. Kane struck first, setting fire to a storage hut on the eastern edge of the camp and letting out whooping war cries that echoed off the canyon walls. The raiders responded immediately, dozens of warriors pouring out to meet the perceived threat. Daphs moved like a shadow, using the chaos to slip into the camp. She reached Esme's cage and made short work of the bindings with her bone knife. Esme nearly sobbed with relief. "Can you run?" Daphs whispered. "Yes, God, yes, thank you." They started back toward the ridge, but a raider spotted them and raised the alarm. Suddenly the camp was swarming toward them. Clint and his Marines opened fire from above, arrows and thrown spears taking down the lead pursuers, but there were too many. Daphs pushed Esme ahead and turned to face the onrushing warriors. Her knife was a blur, opening throats and finding gaps in crude armor. But they kept coming, and she knew she couldn't hold them all. Then Kane was there, having circled back when he heard the alarm. The boy fought with savage grace, his spear punching through a warrior's chest before he spun and kicked another into the ground. Father and son fought side by side, holding the line long enough for Daphs and Esme to gain distance. "Run!" Alan roared. "Lead them to the pools!" They ran, the raiders in pursuit. Alan guided them through the scrubland, following a path only he could see. Behind them, the first raiders hit the sink pools. The ground that looked solid was actually a thin crust over quicksand-like mud. Warriors screamed as they sank, their armor dragging them down faster. The survivors hesitated, and in that moment, Clint's team struck from ambush. Arrows from the darkness, spears from the shadows. The raiders broke and fled back to their camp, having lost a third of their number without landing a single blow. The rescue team regrouped at the cave where they'd camped the night before. Esme was shaken but unharmed. She thanked everyone repeatedly, especially Daphs and Kane, who'd risked the most to save her. "We should keep moving," Alan said. "Crag will send trackers after us. We are not safe until we reach fleet territory." They traveled through the night, exhaustion dogging their steps but fear driving them forward. By dawn, they'd put considerable distance between themselves and the raider camp. They paused at a stream to rest and refill water containers. Kane approached Daphs. "You fight well, like the warriors of old songs. Will you teach me? I can show you some techniques, but your father is your best teacher. He has survived decades in this jungle. Listen to his wisdom." Alan overheard and smiled slightly, the first warmth Daphs had seen from him. The boy is headstrong, like his mother was, but brave, and that counts for much. They reached the fleet camp late that evening, just as Homer was preparing to organize a search party. When he saw Daphs emerge from the jungle, relief flooded his features. He ran to her, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "You're late," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I had to make sure we were not followed, and we had complications." She introduced him to Alan and Kine. Homer shook hands with both, thanking them for their help in rescuing Esme. Barry debriefed the team, his expression growing darker as he heard about Crag's raiders and their cannibalistic practices. "This complicates things. If the other tribes find out we attack Crag's people, even in rescue of our own, they will understand," Daphs said. "Crag is an outcast among outcasts. Even the variants hate him. No one will mourn his dead warriors." The next day's assembly proved her right. When Thek heard about the rescue and the raiders who'd tried to sabotage the peace, he nodded grimly. "Crag is a disease on our people. You did what needed doing. This changes nothing between us." The negotiations continued, and over the following weeks, real progress was made. 3 tribes agreed to a trial cooperation with the fleet, accepting medical aid and education in exchange for allowing scientific study of their world. It was a small beginning, but it was a beginning. Homer and Daphs worked tirelessly, mediating disputes, translating cultural nuances, and building bridges between 2 very different peoples. Alan and Kane stayed on as consultants, with Alan eventually agreeing to serve as a liaison between the fleet and the more remote tribes. One evening, as Homer and Daphs sat together on Redemption's observation deck, watching Verx Prime rotate below them, she leaned against him with a contented sigh. "We are changing things, Homer, slowly but truly. My people will have a future beyond mere survival." "You're changing things. I'm just along for the ride." "Liar. Without you, the tribes would never have trusted the fleet. You showed them that humans can be honorable, can be trusted. You showed me that love can cross any divide." Homer kissed the top of her head. "You make me want to be worthy of that trust, and I love you more than I thought possible." "Show me," she whispered, and he did, there among the stars with her homeworld as their only witness. But their moment of peace was shattered by an alarm from the ship's systems. Daphs jumped to the controls, her expression shifting to concern as she read the data. "What is it?" "A ship, large, heavily armed, and it is broadcasting on Kesh frequencies, but the dialect is ancient. Homer, I think we have found another enclave, but they do not sound friendly." The ship appeared on visual sensors, and it was unlike anything in the fleet database. Organic like Redemption, but larger, more aggressive in its design. It bristled with weapons that looked disturbingly functional despite their apparent age. A transmission came through and Daphs translated. "They call themselves the Purified, the last true Kesh. They say we have betrayed our heritage by allying with aliens. They demand we surrender Redemption and submit to their authority, or they will cleanse both us and the human contamination from Verx Prime." Homer's hand went to his machete instinctively, useless as it would be against a starship. "How long before they are in weapons range?" "Minutes. Homer, Redemption is not a warship. We have no weapons, no shields. If they fire on us, then we run. Plot a course out of the system, best speed. I cannot abandon my people." "You won't be. We'll get help from the fleet, bring back reinforcements. But we need to survive first. Daphs hesitated, torn between duty and survival. Then the enemy ship fired, a warning shot that seared past Redemption's hull close enough to leave scorch marks. The decision was made. She engaged the faster-than-light drive, and they leaped away from Verx Prime in a blur of compressed spacetime. The journey to the nearest fleet stronghold took 2 days of hard flight with the enemy ship in pursuit. Redemption proved faster, but only barely. They arrived at Outpost Garrison, a military installation commanded by Admiral Bertha Klein, a veteran of the frontier wars with a reputation for aggressive defense. Homer and Daphs explained the situation in a rapid briefing. Klein listened with a tactical officer's focus, asking pointed questions about the enemy ship's capabilities and the political situation on Verx Prime. So we've got hostile Kesh with advanced weapons threatening our people and the tribes we've been negotiating with. How many ships do they have? Unknown, Daphs admitted. But if they truly are the Purified, the legends say they fled the Cataclysm with a fleet of 10 warships. Even if only a fraction survived, they could overwhelm any force on Verx Prime. Klein nodded. Then we hit them before they can organize. I'm sending a battle group to Verx Prime. 3 cruisers, 2 destroyers, and support craft. We'll evacuate our people and any tribes that want protection, then blockade the system until we know what we're dealing with. Admiral, these are my people, Daphs said. Please do not start a war if it can be avoided. I don't start wars, young lady. I finish them. But I'll give your people every chance to stand down peacefully. That's the best I can offer. It would have to be enough. The battle group assembled within hours, and Redemption joined the fleet as it jumped back to Verx Prime. Homer stood beside Daphs in Redemption's control room, his hand on her shoulder as they watched the fleet emerge from faster-than-light travel into a combat zone. The Purified had 4 ships in orbit, and they'd landed ground forces near the fleet camp. Smoke rose from several buildings, and the communications channels were filled with distress calls. All ships, engage the enemy, Klein's voice crackled over the comm. Redemption, you stay clear of the fighting. You're not armed for this. But Daphs had other ideas. Redemption recognizes me as its commander. It will protect what I protect, and I will not abandon those below. She guided the living ship toward the planet's surface, diving through the atmosphere at a steep angle that had Homer gripping his seat restraints. They came in low over the jungle, heading for the camp. The scene below was chaos. Purified warriors in ornate armor fought with fleet marines and Kesh tribal warriors who'd sided with the peace initiative. Bodies littered the ground, both human and Kesh. The enemy was winning through superior numbers and fanatical determination. Take us lower, Homer said, an idea forming. Right over that concentrate of purified warriors. Daphs understood immediately. She brought Redemption down to treetop level and opened the cargo bay doors. Homer and a team of Marines who'd volunteered for this insane maneuver prepared to drop. This is crazy, Clint said, checking his weapons one last time. That's why it'll work. They won't expect us to jump out of a moving spaceship with nothing but primitive weapons and attitude. You're insane, Homer. Daphs must really love you to put up with this. She does, and I'm counting on making it back to her to prove I'm worth it. They dropped 30 feet to the ground, rolling to absorb impact. Homer came up with his machete in hand, already moving toward the nearest enemy. The Purified warrior barely had time to register the threat before Homer's blade took him in the throat. The battle was brutal and up close. No room for tactics or strategy, just survival and determination. Homer fought like a man possessed, his blade painting the ground with enemy blood. Beside him, Clint and the other Marines held their own, while Kesh warriors rallied to their defense. Overhead, Redemption circled, and Daphs used the ship's mass as a weapon, creating sonic booms that disoriented the enemy and knocked them off their feet at critical moments. It wasn't much, but it helped even the odds. The turning point came when Alan and Kane arrived with reinforcements from the deep jungle. Dozens of Kesh warriors who'd heard about the battle through tribal networks descended on the Purified from the flanks. Outnumbered and surrounded, the enemy ground forces broke and fled to their landing craft. In orbit, Klein's fleet had destroyed 2 of the Purified ships and forced the others to retreat. The battle was won, but at a terrible cost. 17 fleet personnel dead, dozens wounded, 30 Kesh warriors killed, with many more injured, and the Purified were still out there, somewhere in the vast reaches of space, planning their next move. Homer found Daphs in the makeshift medical tent, helping treat the wounded with a supply of water from the oasis. Her healing properties were limited but provided comfort and slight acceleration of recovery. She looked exhausted, her hands stained with blood both green and red. "Hey," he said softly. She looked up, and tears streaked her face. "So many dead, Homer. On both sides, all of them Kesh. My people killing each other because some cannot accept that survival means adaptation." He pulled her close, heedless of the blood and grime covering them both. "You saved lives today, both with Redemption's intervention and with your healing water. Focus on that. How can I when the purified will return? They will not stop until they have destroyed everything we have built, or we have destroyed them. There can be no peace while they exist. Then we find another way. We talk to them, show them that cooperation doesn't mean betraying Kesh heritage. We prove that your people can honor the past while building a future. You truly believe that is possible? I have to. The alternative is genocide, and I won't be part of that. Neither will you." They held each other as the sun set on Verk's prime, painting the sky in shades of violence and beauty. Around them, human and Kesh worked together to tend the wounded and honor the dead, a fragile alliance forged in blood and hope. In the days that followed, Admiral Klein established a more permanent presence in the system. A space station was constructed, serving as both defensive installation and diplomatic hub. More tribes came to negotiate, drawn by stories of humans who fought beside Kesh against a common enemy. Thek approached Homer with an unexpected proposal. "My people wish to honor you and the woman Daphs. You fought for us when you had no need. You could have fled, but you stayed. This is the mark of true warriors. We offer you a place among our tribe, if you will accept." Homer looked to Daphs, who nodded encouragingly. "We're honored, Thek. Truly. But our work isn't finished. The purified are still out there, and there are other Kesh enclaves to find and bring into the alliance. Then we will wait. The offer stands whenever you choose to accept it. And in the meantime, our warriors will fight beside yours against the purified threat." It was a major victory, one of the most isolated tribes committing to active military cooperation. Word spread quickly, and within weeks, a coalition of Kesh tribes had formed, unified for the first time in millennia by the shared threat and the example set by humans like Homer. But the purified were not idle. They struck at remote settlements, attacking with hit-and-run tactics designed to terrorize and destabilize. Each raid left death and destruction, and each raid made the coalition's resolve stronger. Homer found himself in an unexpected role, military advisor to the tribal coalition. His knowledge of tactics and his ability to think like a guerrilla fighter made him invaluable in planning counter-raids and defensive strategies. He worked closely with Alan, whose deep knowledge of Verk's Prime's terrain complemented Homer's tactical training. They scored their first major victory against the Purified 3 months after the initial battle. Acting on intelligence from a tribe that had captured a Purified scout, they located a raiding base in the southern mountains. Homer led a combined force of Fleet Marines and Kesh warriors in an assault that destroyed the base and captured valuable intelligence about the Purified fleet's location. The information revealed that the Purified had been hiding in a nebula at the edge of the system, using its interference to mask their signatures. Admiral Klein moved quickly, sending her fleet to blockade the nebula's exits. The Purified were trapped. But trapped enemies are dangerous enemies. They launched a desperate assault, all remaining ships attacking simultaneously in a bid to break through the blockade. The battle raged for 6 hours, ship-to-ship combat on a scale rarely seen on the frontier. On the surface, Homer and Daphs could only watch the lights in the sky and wait for news. When it came, it was bittersweet. The Purified fleet had been destroyed, but at the cost of one of Klein's cruisers and severe damage to another. Hundreds of fleet personnel dead, and an unknown number of Purified. In the aftermath, life pods from the destroyed Purified ships were recovered. The survivors were transported to the surface, and Daphs insisted on speaking with them. Klein agreed, though she stationed Marines nearby in case of trouble. The Purified leader, a scarred elder named Traj, refused to speak at first, but Daphs persisted, visiting him daily in his secure quarters. She spoke of the old ways and the new future, of honoring the past while adapting to survive. Slowly, grudgingly, Traj began to listen. It was during one of these sessions that he revealed the true history of the Purified. They weren't fanatics, not originally. They were the survivors who'd witnessed the cataclysm that destroyed the Kesh Empire, a civil war fought with weapons of terrifying power. The destruction had been so complete that the survivors swore never to let their people gain such power again, believing technological advancement inevitably led to self-destruction. You see now why we cannot accept your alliance with the Sky People, Traj said. You repeat the mistakes that destroyed our ancestors. Daphs shook her head. No, we learn from those mistakes. We build carefully, with wisdom and cooperation. The humans are not perfect, but they have shown they can be trusted. They fight beside us, bleed with us, die for us. That is not the behavior of conquerors. Perhaps, but history shows that today's allies become tomorrow's enemies. Better to remain separate, pure, strong in our isolation. Isolation is death, Daphs countered. We were dying slowly, tribe by tribe, generation by generation. The alliance gives us hope, gives us a future. I will not condemn my people to extinction because of ancient fears. The debate continued for weeks. Homer watched Daphs engage with Traj and the other purified survivors, marveling at her patience and conviction. Slowly, some of the purified began to question their rigid ideology. Not all, but enough to matter. Traj finally made an offer. If I can see this cooperation truly benefits our people, if I can witness Kesh prospering without losing their identity, then perhaps I can accept this path. But I must see it with my own eyes, not just hear pretty words. Then you will see it, Daphs promised. Come with us. Visit the tribes that have joined the alliance. See how they maintain their traditions while learning from human knowledge. Judge for yourself. And so began a months-long journey across Verx Prime, with Traj and a small group of purified survivors traveling under guard to see what the alliance had accomplished. They visited Thek's tribe, where Kesh warriors trained alongside fleet marines, learning new tactics while teaching ancient techniques. They saw medical clinics where human doctors worked with Kesh healers, combining modern medicine with traditional remedies. They met Alan and Kine, living proof that human and Kesh could coexist peacefully, even lovingly. They watched as fleet engineers helped tribes build irrigation systems and improve shelters, not replacing Kesh methods but enhancing them. And everywhere they went, they saw Kesh culture not just surviving, but thriving, adapting without being destroyed. Homer accompanied the tour, along with Clint and Cora, representing the human perspective. He spoke honestly about the challenges, the cultural misunderstandings, the times when cooperation had been difficult. But he also spoke about the victories, the friendships formed, the future being built together. By the time they returned to the main settlement, even Traj had to admit the alliance was working. He addressed the gathered tribes and fleet personnel with grudging respect. I have seen what you build here. It is not what I expected. Perhaps my people were wrong to see only danger in cooperation. Perhaps there is a way to honor the past while embracing the future. He turned to Daphs. You have shown great wisdom, daughter of the Kesh, greater than I gave you credit for. Will you join us, Traj? Will you help build this future? The old warrior was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. We will, but slowly, carefully. And if we see the old dangers returning, we reserve the right to walk away. That is all we ask, a chance to prove ourselves. The integration of the purified survivors took time, but it represented a major breakthrough. With their technical knowledge of ancient Kesh systems and their eventual acceptance of the alliance, progress accelerated. Within a year, the first Kesh-human hybrid settlement was established, a place where both species lived and worked together as equals. Homer and Daphs were there for the founding ceremony, representing the bridge between worlds that they'd become. Admiral Klein spoke about cooperation and mutual benefit. Thek spoke about warrior honor and shared struggle, and Daphs spoke about hope. We were dying, she said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd of humans in Kesh. Tribe by tribe, generation by generation, we were fading into extinction, but we were too proud to see it, too scared to change. Then the Sky People came, and some of us saw opportunity where others saw only threat. Homer showed me that courage isn't about fighting alone. It's about knowing when to accept help. And together, we are building something neither of our peoples could achieve separately. This settlement is proof. We are stronger together. The crowd erupted in cheers, a sound that echoed across the jungle and seemed to promise a new era for Verx Prime. That night, as Homer and Daphne stood together watching the celebration, she took his hand and led him away from the crowds to a quiet spot overlooking a valley bathed in moonlight. Homer, I have been thinking about the future, about our future. Yeah, what about it? We have spent so much time building a future for our peoples. But what about us? What do we want? Homer turned to face her fully, seeing uncertainty in her eyes for the first time in months. I want you, however that works, wherever we end up. You're it for me, Daphs. Even if it means staying here, on Verx Prime, my people need me, need us. I cannot abandon them now, not when we have come so far. I know, and I'm okay with that. Earth will always be there if we want to visit, but this is where we're needed. This is where we make a difference. He pulled her close. Besides, I've gotten used to the local wildlife trying to kill me. It'd be boring anywhere else. She laughed, a sound of pure joy and relief. You are ridiculous, Homer of Earth, and I love you beyond measure. Love you too, Daphs of Verx Prime, now and always. They kissed under the light of 3 moons, 2 beings from different worlds who'd found in each other something neither had known they needed. The future stretched before them, full of challenges and unknowns, but they would face it together, and that was enough. 2 weeks later, Homer found himself in a situation he'd never expected, teaching a class of young Kesh warriors how to fight with human techniques. The training ground was a cleared section of jungle near the settlement, and his students ranged from eager teenagers to grizzled veterans like Thek. The key, Homer explained, demonstrating with his machete, is efficiency. Don't waste movement. Every strike should serve a purpose. He moved through a series of cuts and blocks, his blade whistling through the air. Your people fight with power and fury, which is good, but sometimes precision beats strength. Kane stepped forward to spar. The boy had grown in skill over the months, his hybrid vigor giving him advantages of both species. They circled each other, wooden practice blades held ready. Kane struck first, a powerful overhead chop. Homer deflected and countered, his blade stopping an inch from Kane's throat. Dead, Homer said. What did you do wrong? I committed too much to the first strike, left myself open. Exactly, again. They sparred for another 20 minutes with Homer offering corrections and praise in equal measure. Watching from the sideline, Daphs felt a warmth in her chest. This was what peace looked like. Former enemies learning from each other, building something new together. A commotion at the settlement's edge interrupted the training. Scouts were returning, and they were carrying someone. Homer and Daphs rushed over to find a human woman, badly wounded, barely conscious. Her clothes were torn, and deep claw marks crossed her torso. Found her in the Northern Territories, one of the scouts reported. Says her survey ship crashed. She's been surviving alone for 3 weeks. Cora was already administering first aid, but the woman needed more than field medicine. Get her to the medical center now, she ordered. Homer helped carry the stretcher, and as they moved, the woman's eyes flickered open. She focused on him with obvious effort. Please, my crew, still out there, northern wastes. How many? Homer asked gently. 4. Maybe alive, maybe not. Please. She lost consciousness again. Homer looked at Daphs and saw his own determination reflected in her eyes. They couldn't leave people to die in the jungle, not when they had the skills to mount a rescue. Within an hour, they had a team assembled. Homer, Daphs, Clint, Alan, and 6 Kesh warriors from Thek's tribe. They took basic supplies and weapons, planning to move fast and light. The northern wastes were treacherous, full of razor beasts and hostile terrain. They pushed hard through the afternoon and into the evening, following the coordinates the woman had managed to give before passing out. The jungle grew denser, more primitive, as if they were traveling back in time. Strange calls echoed through the canopy, creatures Homer had never heard before. At dusk, they found the crash site. The survey ship had plowed through the canopy and buried itself in a ravine, its hull crumpled and smoking. But there were signs of life. A small camp set up nearby, a fire burning low, and three figures huddled together. "Survivors!" Clint called out as they approached. "We're here to help!" The three survivors were in bad shape, injured and half-starved, but alive. They babbled their thanks, relief overwhelming them. But Homer's count was off. The woman had said 4 crew members, but they'd only found 3. "Where's the fourth, Warnanashorn?" he asked. The senior survivor, a man named Barry, pointed toward the jungle with a shaking hand. "Peterson. He went looking for water 2 days ago. Never came back. We couldn't search. Too injured. Too scared." Homer exchanged a glance with Daphs. One more person out there, maybe still alive. They couldn't leave without trying. "Alan, Clint, get these 3 ready to move. Daphs and I will do a quick search for Peterson. 1 hour, then we head back regardless." They moved into the darkening jungle, following a faint trail. Within minutes, they heard sounds of struggle ahead. They burst into a clearing to find a man fighting desperately against a juvenile razor beast. He had a broken branch as his only weapon, and he was losing. Homer's arrow took the beast in the eye. Daphs followed up with her spear, driving it deep into the creature's throat. The razor beast collapsed, and Peterson fell to his knees, gasping. "Thought I was dead," he managed. "Thank you. Thank you." They returned to the crash site and began the long trek back to the settlement. The survivors needed support to walk, slowing their pace significantly. Night fell completely, and the jungle came alive with predators. Twice they had to fight off razor beasts. Once a pack of smaller but vicious creatures attacked, and only the combined effort of human and Kesh drove them off. Homer took a nasty bite to his arm but kept moving. Dawn found them exhausted but triumphant, arriving at the settlement with all 4 survivors alive. The medical team took over immediately, and Homer finally allowed himself to collapse onto a bench outside the clinic. Daphs sat beside him, equally exhausted. "We make a good team," she said softly. "The best," he agreed, taking her hand, "though I could do with less rescuing people and more quiet time together." "Where would be the fun in that?" He laughed despite his fatigue. She was right. This was who they were. Warriors, rescuers, bridge builders, and he wouldn't have it any other way.